G'day and welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to do a talk about, as the title on the video says, shot calls. And that's shot calls in the Mark and Sam style, the 4AW style. I suppose I'd go through a couple of things and a couple of different bits and pieces to try and get to that and explain it all. First off, where our spotting and calling and communication, our talking and what we've done in the way of, and what everyone sees in the way of our extreme long range shooting, or pretty much for all our shooting in different formats, was designed out of what works for us. I don't want to tell anyone the way it should be. This is what works for us, and we use what works for us. I suppose I'd say there's things that I think are very important for everyone to understand in the way of doing things, but there's lots of other ingredients that are involved. There's dogmas and military backgrounds and how you use things and all sorts of stuff that are going to come into this conversation, but there is, it all comes down to what works for you. Then the next bit I'd go to try and say with that is that we, and I said this a lot, we're not professionally trained, we're not military trained, we don't have other stuff we've brought into this equation. We haven't worked this from anything other than what works for us, which may have some negatives, may have some positive to us. It probably means we have a fairly fresh approach to things, but it also means we probably, our style of doing things doesn't work for other people. So, to start off with, what we're actually talking about largely is the Sam's calls and the way she does her calls are, you'll hear us talk about one target, target sizes is what we're actually talking about. It'll be one target to the right and three targets low, or whatever it is type thing, and we're talking targets.
Tall and right. Three targets right, quarter target tall.
Kill you think. Most people want to hear the talk in MOA or in mil, and wind calls in half value or full value, or all the different bits and pieces and all the different, as said, dogmas in some fashion, processes in other fashion, and that sort of stuff. First off, our process is about, fundamentally, Sam is calling what she saw. Her job is to call where that impact was. You'll notice if you watch the videos when the shot, or the beginning of the shoot, or when the shot is, the impact is further away from target, you'll tend to find the call is probably a little less accurate. She'll call 4 targets low when it was really 8 targets low, or she'll call 6 targets low when it was really 4 targets low, or that sort of stuff. But the bit that's going on here, and the bit that she does very, very well, I don't do as well, but Sam does very, very well, is call very quickly a general idea of where it is.
Right and low. Hard to see. 5 targets low, 2 targets right.
Now keep in mind, this is communication between us. This is not that needs to be exactly right. No one can see anything. That needs to be precise so we can then do mathematical equations on for it. It really is more to the point where it is a very quick call to me, so I have an idea. In most cases, I will have seen that as well. But it is, and I suppose now I'll get right into what the real core of what we're doing is. Sam is passing on the information of where the impact was, so I can do the calculations of getting to target. But as said, it is less a fine detail thing the further away we are, and the closer the shot gets, you'll find the more accurate and the more spot on those calls get.
Just right. one target right, 2 o'clock.
And that's because, as said, I'll be seeing the shot to a little bit myself, but the way we do things, and this is probably the fundamental difference you'll see to most spotting and calling and spotter, sniper, spotter, shooter sort of relationships, is that all the maths is done in my head. That is not Sam's job. We probably share the load differently. I have very core reasons for doing this, but let me explain what we're doing in the way of sharing the load on the getting onto target. Sam's job is to see and to pass on information as quickly as possible, concisely as possible. And what that means is in the littlest time and the least words. Yes, that sounds like a peculiar thing to some people, I suppose, but that's because my job is to perform properly behind the rifle, but also to do the rest of the working out. So work things out. So I'm doing a few things when it comes to that sort of stuff. To start off with, in ELR stuff, and actually in most shooting, exactly where your bullet hit, it's not just adjusting onto target by that amount of elevation change or windage change and that sort of stuff. I have to understand more of what's going on. I won't get too complicated in this little talk about it here, but elevation isn't a direct change when you're talking and shooting across a flat paddock and especially at extreme long range. There's more involved than just that adjustment. Even windage is not a simple process. If you have just shot short and you want to shoot longer, the wind is going to affect your bullet more. So there's like I said, I won't get too complicated, but there's a lot more going on. There's also you've probably people heard me talk about this before, when you are looking at shooting where the bullet is traveling a reasonable amount of time, you are using a little bit of intuition to work out where you've got to place that shot. So to work out where you've got to place that shot, there's a lot of things going on. I'm working with all the conditions and all the bits and pieces and stuff that I've seen previously, but or on that shot I should say, but I'm also working with stuff I've seen previously. So what's been happening with the wind over the shot before, or the 2 shots before, or the 10 shots before. I'm trying to pull that together. So what I'm actually saying, without getting too complicated, is I'm thinking pretty flat out. And I may be listen, very different to everyone else and maybe exactly the same, but personally I'm not great at thinking flat out if I'm listening at the same time. I find that if I'm listening and thinking, I'm doing both of them at half pace. So I'd much prefer to be thinking in close to silence about what I'm doing, which means that that limits, for our best communication, that limits Sam's to minimum words to pass on what she can. So then I'm flat out thinking about what I'm doing. And then Sam's also busy in that time as well. She is then keeping an eye on what those conditions are doing. She's also keeping an eye on the environment around us, both in the environment for the weather and that side of things, but also in the way of the wildlife, also in the way of the roads, also in the way of any equipment or things that shouldn't be moving. Everything should be bolted down, but we live in a dynamic world, and her job is to keep an eye on all those things. And yes, that does happen on occasion. She'll see a truck that's moving that isn't supposed to be in there, but it's come in there, it's gone past the gate, or it's done like that sort of stuff, and we'll stop shooting. It might still be 3 kilometres away from where it's going to affect us, but we would much rather err on the side of safety. So part of her job is to stay aware, doing that all the time. So there is another very important part to this process that I've sort of explained what we're doing. I'm thinking about the shot. Sam's passing on the impact and nothing else. And I suppose that's where there's a fundamental difference to a lot of people. You hear a lot of spotting calls where they will say, you need to shoot X amount to the left or X amount to the right. You need to put in a bit more. They are essentially calling the shot adjustment. On that score, I have a fundamental disagreement with that way of doing things. Now I get it, and I get there's processes where that works, and I get there's places where it works. In the military side of things, when you've got shooter, spotters making all the calls, that sort of stuff, okay, I understand it sort of works there, but the fundamental problem I have there is the only person that knows what happened on that shot is the shooter. The spotter knows where the bullet landed. He does not know what happened to the trigger finger. He does know what happened as the gun reacted. He does know what happened to the sight picture as the shot was fired. If you're an experienced shooter, then you know that you have a fair bit of information the moment you squeeze that trigger. Now, you may have been going to squeeze that trigger and it moved just as you broke the trigger and you saw it move. So you know it went to the left side of the target. So that's in your head. You may have squeezed that trigger, and when the rifle actually reacted, you know that it went to one side or the other, which it didn't do on other shots. You may know that when you pulled the trigger, there was something happening at your target. There was something happening just at that moment. What I'm trying to say with all those bits and pieces, from rifle movement to sight picture to when you actually squeeze to how you pull the trigger to whether you yank the trigger or not, to all those bits and pieces, is only one soul in this universe that knows what actually happened. It's the guy on the trigger. So in my mind, how on earth can a spotter make a call on that? Unless the spotter's making a call and then the shooter is taking their call and then putting this other information into it, and then taking their information out and, listen, that's a mess. So I do it the other way around. Once again, and I suppose I'll stop and excuse myself or apologise for if it works perfectly for you. I'm not trying to say you should change it by any means, and that's what it works. And I get there's situations, and the military's probably the military and police side of things, and their structures are very much set up to be able to unbolt one and bolt one back in, and everyone works the same. So that sort of relationship. And in fast moving targets and things with wind calls and things, stuff's going to change. And in that situation, our form is probably a little more clunky than the very hard set practice processes that people go through. But for what we're doing in our sort of shooting, in our extreme range shooting in particular, but our extreme precision shooting even in moderate ranges, is passing on the roles are slightly different. Like I said, the spotter's job is spotting the conditions, the environment, the stuff that's going on around, and calling the impact, and the impact only, not trying to make any maths of anything else whatsoever. The shooter's job is to take that information and use with everything they have. So in our way of doing it, in my way of doing it, I'm doing all the maths. All of the maths, all of the shot call, and actually what to do, how to adjust, where to get on, all those bits and pieces are all my responsibility. And as said, that's because to me, the only person that knows that happens on every trigger break is the shooter. So that's how we do it. Largely, you'll see our system gets a little more clunky when we operate the other way around. So when I'm spotting and Sam's shooting, we're both very practiced and skilled at the other way around. Doesn't mean that Sam's not a very good shooter, and it doesn't mean that I can't spot. I would suggest that she's a better shooter than I am a spotter. Our relationship works the other way around, a little bit nicer, but still it's the same process, except Sam isn't doing as much of the calculations. I'll still do the calculations. That's my job in our little team. So I start to be able to, I do it a little bit backwards where I start to help her adjust and that sort of stuff. But that's why we're a little more clunky in that situation. Anyway, that's our process. That's what we do it. I should say in the bit that I want to finish on there is the MOA calls and that sort of stuff. People ask reasonably regularly, why do you call in target size? Why don't you call in MOA size and that side of things, or mil? So get yourself a different spotting scope that has a mil reticle in it and do it like that. Listen, yes, I think that would work in places. There's once again some fundamentals that are wrong in that situation, and that is when you're spotting at extreme long range and looking for very fine details. There's some stuff that Sam manages to see which, listen, might look easy when you're watching on a video and a replay, that side of things. In real life, you don't get to rerun it, you don't get to recheck, you don't get to go back and do that sort of stuff, so you've got to see it. Sam in particular has learned a very special process to be able to, especially at the beginning of our ELR shoots, to zoom back so she's got a larger field of view, which means then she's trying to see with little magnification at very long ranges, very, very clearly, and be able to try and spot wherever that is, especially when we're doing a new pushing the boundaries and going too far. We don't know exactly where the bullet's going to go. We don't know exactly what the conditions are happening. So we can be 100 yards away from the target in the first impact. That's not that uncommon. And to spot that takes quite a bit of skill. But it also means you want a completely clear reticle, or no reticle I should say, a completely clear spotting scope. If you've got little lines and little dots, even little ones, and they happen to line up with, to start off with, you've got an image that is slightly going to be moving around over the top of a paddock we're generally shooting into, those are distractions that the spotter does not want. You want to be able to spot that little tiny thing that might only be there for a millisecond, but it's still a bit of image. You need to see that to be able to spot, to be able to get onto it. The other side of things, which is probably a little more of a personal bit, is, as said, I'm doing all the maths and I'm doing all the allowances and that side of things. And to me, as said a little bit, you might see a shot that is 6 targets low. Let's say at 2,400 yards. So it's a nice simple thing. It's a 24-inch plate. So 6 targets low would mean that it's 6 MOA low. It's not a 6 MOA adjustment onto target because, and I've done videos to explain that, but you're not going to get a direct raise. You're going to raise a little bit and it's going to land still short of the target. So I have to do the maths to put myself back onto target. And I do that, I suppose, a little bit easier if I'm not taking one MOA and turning it into another MOA. We do the target thing, I know roughly where I'm at and I know roughly where to go. I also don't stress too much about trying to get it in the next shot because I know that's hard to work out and sometimes, so I'll take, well, to be honest, an educated guess, wind up in a normal sort of paddock. If it was 6 MOA low and we're at 2,400 yards, then I'd probably run up about 10 MOA is what I'm going to lift. So, in the 3 and a bit mil sort of stuff is the sort of lift that I'm going to put into it. And then I'm going to see, and the different gradient of the paddock is going to make a different difference. It's almost impossible to figure out unless you know exactly all the maths that are on that equation. So for me to have another shot is a less stressful way to get there. And generally at that stage we're also working things out a little bit. But my comment is to put it in both in the call. I'd prefer to have it in something that we can both see. So we're not trying to make any assessments, we're not trying to do anything else, but it's something we can both see. If we have a nice convenient fact that we have a 24-inch target, so that maths is always in my head. But that can also be when we're shooting at something else, that can be whatever that is. If it happens to be an old car body out there and you're shooting that, then it's 1.5 car bodies right of the car body. Well, it's 1.5 car bodies. It's what everyone can see. It's very clear, very concise. And as said, both eyes are out there, and you'll find quite commonly part of the fact that Sam is calling quickly is that I can, by her calling like that, the memory's still fresh. You can sometimes bring that image up into hindsight. Largely for us, it's just a very strong way to communicate. And I suppose that's where I'd come back to at the finish of the conversation to go with this is about spotter-shooter communication, which is spotter-shooter relationship. That doesn't mean you need to be married to them. It means that at that moment, that is a relationship. And that has to work for you. I'd have to say some of the videos I see of some guys shooting and that sort of stuff, there's a couple of side of things. I see a lot of where that information isn't passing on very fluently. I see a lot of where did that hit, really trying to find that out. And you would find their shooting would be improved if that call was concise and fast to them of exactly what they could pass on. That information was easier. It just gives you more time to think as a shooter. I also see where there are chatterboxes, guys going on about what happened on the weekend. There's a whole heap of conversation going on, people shooting. I suppose first off, I'd say, listen, hats off to the guys who can do that sort of stuff. I would struggle. A whole heap of chatting and noise and that sort of stuff. Like I said, I'm not real good at listening to people and trying to do the job I can't do well. But equally, if I'm really trying to think hard and I've got a whole heap of other racket going on, I've sort of got to get it to a different mode. And there is that mode, but in this relaxed world of extreme long range shooting, I'd much rather it be quiet for a little time while we're doing that. Personal thing, like I said, hats off to the guys, all the guys that do it as well as they do it, when they do it and that sort of stuff. But for explanation as to what we do and why we do it, this is what works for us. And the fundamentals of my process come down to the job, the work sharing, the way we do it. The shooter's job is doing the shoot in our world is doing the maths, doing the shot, doing the corrections, and the main reason for the corrections is the only person that knows what happened when that rifle released the bullet is a shooter. The spotter only knows where the bullet landed. But the spotter's job is also real busy. We're doing their job properly, paying attention to everything, and whatever that is, in whatever scenario, whether that's in military, in an action situation, or that's a hunting situation, or that's whatever, the spotter still has a whole heap to do. So I would prefer my way of doing it. The responsibilities are a little different to what most of us see. Anyway, I hope that makes sense to people. Like I said, not trying to tell anyone how to suck eggs, but that's how we do it. Anyway, thanks guys. We'll catch you next time.
Hi everybody, Sam here. If you like the video and you like what we do, it'd be great to get some support. There's a few ways to do that. Over here, there's a link to a web store which not only has our products, but it has support bits. The money from that goes directly to our channel. And we have our coffee cups. These are $30, they cost us $10. So that's $20 that will go directly into helping us bring these videos to you. Every bit of support is greatly appreciated. Thanks everybody, bye for now.